A huge time in college football right now, with a lot hinging on what happens with the college football playoff. And quite frankly, we could be just a month away from the Big Ten and the SEC taking their ball and going home and doing their own thing with their own playoff. Welcome into the channel. On this channel, we talk college football, college basketball, conference realignment all day, every day. Make sure you get subscribed. If you are not, click the bell so you know when I'm going live. Wednesdays and Sundays, live shows that are a blast, very lively. If you're a college football fan of any kind, make sure that you are here for that. Please like the video if you can, and let me know what you think in the comments. How would you feel about the Big Ten and the SEC doing their own thing? And if they're going to get 4 automatic bids in a college football playoff anyway, do you think they should just take their ball and go home? Let me know in the comments how you feel about it. Like the video, and if you want to support the channel, you can do so on Venmo at John-Kurtz-4. So a lot happened earlier this week. We got the 5+7 model approved for the next 2 years in the college football playoff. Beyond that, there was a lot of discussion on Wednesday about different models, talk of 14, perhaps even a 16-team playoff, different scenarios laid out there that ranged all over the board, including one that might have 12 automatic bids of the 14 teams that would be in a college football playoff, which would be a pretty wild model to go to, but that is on the table. That has been discussed. We still have no consensus, though. There was a holdup for a minute because Kirk Schultz was wanting to make a proposal that the Pac-12 should continue to get the same rights as everybody else. That did not go over well, but he did eventually vote for 5+7. There have been roadblocks to progress. It was 3 years ago that we even got the suggestion at first to go to a 12-team playoff. It took literally 3 years for it to get pushed through. These decisions have not been made on a very expedited timeline ever. And that's important because right now there's a deal from ESPN on the table, $1.3 billion that they want to pay for the college football playoff, but that may go away. It may go away if nothing can get figured out in the next month. All the details for the playoff from 2026 and beyond need to get ironed out, the big ones anyway, over the next month, or ESPN may say, forget this, we're not bidding on this anymore. And at that point, you would risk angering Greg Sankey and Tony Petitti from the Big Ten and the SEC, who have all the leverage. Perhaps that would be the moment that they would break off and just do their own playoff. I'm going to read you from an Andrew Marchand piece here, who is the best sports media reporter in the game. It's also a little bit mixed in from his colleagues at The Athletic, like Stuart Mandel, who are just the regular college football beat guys. But it's good in understanding where things are at and why there is such a sense of urgency right now. I'm going to start in the middle of the piece here, where it says ESPN executives are growing impatient. And as Puck business writer John Oran first mentioned, they will consider pulling the offer if the college football playoff fails to get its act together soon. Quote, what's the alternative? No playoff, said a source involved in the discussions. That's not feasible. That would be a disaster. ESPN has not yet set a deadline for the college football playoff to ratify its deal, but a source with knowledge of ESPN's thinking said, quote, it isn't going to wait forever. The current contract between the college football playoff and ESPN averages $609 million per year, but escalates over time, which is why ESPN sees its new terms as a 28% increase, according to executives briefed on their discussions. The network is currently on the hook to pay around $800 million for each of the final 2 seasons of the original contract. So Ross Dellinger throws in here more on the timeline, and this is why I say a month. This is where that month figure comes in. Ross Dellinger from Yahoo Sports says college football playoff leaders are working on a somewhat urgent timeline. The 10 FBS leagues and Notre Dame are bound together by the TV contract with ESPN, a deal that expires after the 25 playoff. Despite negotiations with ESPN to extend the deal, no agreement has been reached, predominantly because of several unresolved issues, including the format and revenue sharing model for a playoff beyond 2025. Look, that was all unnecessary. I'm sorry. I just made you sit through that. Here's the key. Bill Hancock, college football playoff executive director, says such issues need to be resolved within a month. There is your key quote. Such issues need to be resolved within a month. Andrew Marchand didn't have a specific timeline, just got, they aren't going to wait forever. But Bill Hancock says such issues need to be resolved within a month. More from the Andrew Marchand story. One possible alternative is what many across college sports feared when the SEC and Big Ten announced their new joint advisory group, an eventual breakaway of the richest and most powerful leagues in college athletics. Even if only serving as an implied threat, it could give the two conferences significant leverage in negotiations that will determine the future of college athletics. Quote, the corporate bottom line world does not have the same expectations of collegiality from colleagues as higher education, one said. And when it comes to college football playoff negotiations, they clash. That's a funny line in all of this, right? So look, it's talking about what I'm mentioning there. Like, hey, possible alternative if the playoff thing doesn't get worked out is that the Big Ten and the SEC just break off and create their super league and go full in on that. Full in heel, full in evil, break the sport in half. But then it comes down to this line about the corporate bottom line world doesn't have the same expectations of being collegial to each other as higher education. Yeah, well, we've learned that. I mean, the Pac-12 knows that very well. They're the cautionary tale on that, right? The high and mighty ivory tower presidents that were very high and mighty. They didn't think anything like USC and UCLA and Oregon and Washington leaving and the entire conference imploding was actually possible. But then it happened because we're not living in a world of what the previous expectations have been. This is a new deal, baby. Money rules everything, and you are going to be left behind in a hurry if you don't act in a pretty cutthroat manner. So yeah, of course, it's not going to have the same sort of boundaries that you would have in higher education. It's been nearly 3 years since a 4-person subcommittee first proposed a 12-team model. It's been more than 17 months since the Board of Managers forced the commissioners back to the table and officially approved it. Yet very few of its most consequential issues are resolved, despite dozens of meetings of the commissioners, mostly at the Dallas-Fort Worth Airport hotels. It's embarrassing, said one commissioner. It was embarrassing how long it took to get to 12. Some commissioners in the room acknowledge that the mighty Big Ten and SEC have the leverage to chart a course forward, but have yet to throw it around. Those commissioners also say they don't know what exactly the Big Ten and the SEC want out of the remaining debates. That was another interesting line to me from this story. I mean, clearly they're going to want more access for their teams relative to everybody else. They're going to want a higher cut of revenue than everybody else. They're going to want more voting power than everybody else. But I guess the vibe there would be, out of all of that, what specifically do they want the most? What do they value the most? How much are they willing to throw their weight around? If you check out the live video from Wednesday night, definitely discussed what some of Ross Dellinger's reporting and others from that meeting on Wednesday was. And it seemed like, at least going through Bill Hancock from Ross Dellinger, that it was at least productive and collegial and not as contentious as many suspected it might be, which would tell you that perhaps the Big Ten and the SEC aren't throwing around quite as much muscle as they could in this scenario, when they could basically throw around as much as they want. Now, you can be optimistic or not about it. I am maybe just a smidge optimistic about it, but also very much a realist in how this could go down when, it comes down to brass tacks here in the next month. But at least seemed a little bit more positive than that update could have been from everything that happened on Wednesday. One final note here from the TV deal. ESPN does have the option to sub-license 5 college football games per season, college football playoff games per season. Sub-licensing meaning they could sell it out to NBC, Fox, whoever it might be that would want to get in on a couple of games. At its discretion, ESPN can look at the market and decide if it wants to let other networks in for a fee at any point through 2032. So it may not be all ESPN, but ESPN would still be controlling all of it. They would be getting the money for all of it. That's what really ultimately matters here. ESPN would still have the power if the deal goes through, but the clock is ticking. Tick, 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 my friends. Could be tick, tick, tick on a massive, massive blow up of the model in college sports if things don't go well. I would still imagine they're going to get something done, but that threat is on the table, and it's something that needs to be talked about here as we enter in an extremely consequential time in the history of college sports. So like the video. Let me know what you think of all this in the comments. Where do you feel like things are at right now? How much of a risk is this? And John-Kurtz-4 on Venmo if you want to support the channel there. I appreciate all of you guys. Take care, and I will talk to you soon.